Chapter 573 Fierce Bone Undead General. Dark clouds hung low in the sky. It felt like they could almost touch the top of the observation tower. A man in uniform was sitting inside the observation tower, an unlit cigarette in his mouth. His eyes were lazily scanning the dusky land ahead. A few skeletons were roaming aimlessly, while a few zombies were leaning against the walls, trying to climb them. A few fairly quick undead were sprinting around. These were like small animals in the eyes of the soldiers, hence the man simply did not pay too much attention to them. Suddenly, the heavenly eagles circling around the observation tower let out a warning cry. The soldier quickly spat out the cigarette in his mouth and locked his gaze in the direction the heavenly eagle had warned him about. Two deep groans echoed in the darkness, followed by a huge section of the solid ground being shoved aside. A creature with horns like bulls, but in the wrong direction, rose from the gap. When it stomped its feet on the ground, it immediately blew away the dust all around it. The sinister bones were making a terrifying crackling noise as the creature moved. Its bloodshot eyes were like two LED lamps, emitting an eerie glow. The creature immediately saw the heavenly eagle soaring in the sky as soon as it woke up from its sleep. It was enraged and tossed a giant rock into the sky. The heavenly eagle reacted swiftly, altering its path and dodging the rock. The heavenly eagle did not dare to stay any longer. It quickly returned to the observation tower. The man in uniform observed the creature's direction of movement and frowned. He brought a communication device to his lips and said sternly, "Attention, a warrior-level undead has appeared in the northeast. Attention, a warrior-level undead has appeared in the northeast. It seems like it's trying to destroy the walls. Eliminate it at once." The voice soon spread into the tower, including the room the students were waiting in. The hunter in his 30s immediately rose to his feet. He glanced at the group, who had fully prepared themselves, and said, "It's a warrior-level undead. The other teams were all entrusted with missions. It seems like we'll have to deal with it. Humph, it's meaningless to only fight against the servant-class undead. They should have let us fight against warrior-level creatures long ago." Zhang Li laughed with great anticipation. "We'll receive lots of merits if we can kill a warrior-level undead," said the female student wearing a hat excitedly. "Warrior-level undead are fairly savage. We have to be more cautious," warned the hunter. "It won't be a problem for us. Our only worry is that these guys who just joined us are only a bunch of rookies. They are likely going to wet their pants soon," replied Zhang Li. The team had 7 people: the hunter who was the team's leader, the irritating Zhang Li, the handsome man, the girl wearing a hat, Zhou Ming, Mo Fan, and Mu Bai. Wang Pengze and Zhao Kunsen were staying close to the walls. They were too weak to fight against a warrior-level undead. As the 7 finished preparing themselves, the heavenly eagle battle mage flew over to them. He glanced at the team and said sternly, "Eliminate the creature as soon as possible. We can't let it get close to the walls. Don't worry, the 7 of us are all intermediate magicians. We won't have any problem dealing with a warrior-level undead," said the hunter leader. The team only had 5 people before. With Mo Fan and Mu Bai in the team, it would be a lot easier to take down a warrior-level undead. "All right, I'll ask a group of magicians on the walls to open a path for your team. I'll leave the rest to you," said the battle mage. A white glowing light appeared on the battle mage's hand, which he fired into the sky above the walls. Once the signal was sent out, a group of magicians quickly gathered. The uniformed soldiers seemed fairly well trained, quickly lining up on the walls. "Straight ahead, fire!" The battle mage in the air gave the group of magicians the order. The magicians immediately drew their star patterns. Bright red glows encapsulated them as they finished casting fire bursts. The group consisted of 30 people, each a fire magician. Every one of them was holding a ball of restless flame in their hand. 30 fireballs were thrown down the walls at the same time, resulting in a small meteor shower pouring down. The undead close to the walls were instantly burned into ashes. Continue. Another 30 fire bursts were launched further away from the walls. The fire immediately dyed the black land red, setting the ground aflame, like a burning red carpet. The undead gathering close to the walls were burned to death. "All right, Let's move out. The leader waved his hand when he saw the path was cleared, and was the first to jump down from the tall walls. The others were quite courageous, too, quickly following their leader and jumping down from the walls. The remaining flames were still burning the ground close to their feet. The group of fire magicians on the walls had opened a path for them, allowing them to reach the warrior-level undead fairly quickly. Their advance was incredibly smooth, but soon everyone had walked out of the range of the fire magicians. They would have to clear the rest of the path themselves. Everyone in the team was an intermediate magician, and adept at using basic spells. In order to preserve energy, they were using basic spells to handle the zombies and skeletons lunging at them, and occasionally an intermediate spell to clear a huge group of undead. It's a fierce bone undead general. It doesn't have any unique moves, but its body is solid like steel because of its bones, which also granted a formidable strength. The experienced hunter soon identified the type of the warrior-level undead. Fierce bone undead general, a variant that was considered fairly savage among the undead skeletons. Normally, a team of elite intermediate magicians was needed to eliminate it. As a matter of fact, the fierce bone undead general was already quite close to the walls. It was at most 300 meters away. As the 7 magicians were charging in its direction, it was also charging at the team. In the dark, a pair of bloodshot eyes appeared first. As everyone assumed the creature was still some distance away, its sinister white bones were already racing in the team's direction like a truck. Defensive position, maintain the formation, rock barrier, yelled the hunter. Even though the fierce bone undead general had yet to collide with anyone, the visual impact of its aggressive attack swept into the team's minds like a tide of terror. Chapter 574. You're not the only one with spikes. The large rock barrier was crushed into pieces when the fierce bone undead general slammed into it. It was obviously not sturdy enough, as the warrior-level creature's bones were a few times stronger than the rocks. Damn it, spread out, quick! The leader immediately yelled at his team behind him when he saw that something was not right. While giving the order, the leader slammed his hands on the ground, spreading the layer of black soil apart rapidly like a wave. The wave helped the team to spread out as the ferocious fierce bone undead general went past the team members in the middle. Long bones like horns on its shoulders suddenly left its body and flew at the scattering magicians like huge spikes. My hand! My hand! The girl wearing a hat instantly screamed. A spike like a long spear had penetrated her arm and nailed her to the ground. Fresh blood poured out from her arm and flowed to her hand. Damn it! Something isn't right about this fierce bone undead general. The leader glanced at his team member and cursed in his heart. Mu Bai was the closest to the girl. He jumped in front of the girl and grabbed the spike with his hand covered in frost. The frost rapidly spread along the spike. Not only did it freeze the spike, but it also froze the cut on the girl's arm. Mu Bai clenched his hand into a fist, shattering the 2 segments of the spike into pieces, leaving the part that had punctured the girl's hand as it was to stop the bleeding. The bones of a warrior-level undead were usually poisonous. If the poison was allowed to spread to the rest of her body, not only would she lose her arm, her life would be at risk, too. How do you feel? Mu Bai asked the girl. The girl's pale face slightly recovered. She could no longer feel her arm and the wound as they were frozen. She was able to calm down after the pain disappeared, much better. Mu Bai asked the girl to stand further away. He turned around and faced the fierce bone undead general. A star pattern was drawn adeptly under his feet. A moment later, 3 ice chains simultaneously appeared on his sides. The ice chains danced wildly as they flew at the fierce bone undead general. The chains quickly wrapped around the undead's lower limbs, arms, and waist to hinder its movement. The fierce bone undead general's strength was shocking. It forcibly broke free from the chains before the frost could even penetrate its body. The pieces of broken ice chains splintered across the place. Back off. I'll let it have a piece of my wind disk, yelled Zhang Li. A strong gust containing dark streaks of energy rose like a giant black serpent and swept forward rapidly. The strong wind slammed into the fierce bone undead general's body with great might, The creature did not dodge the attack, but opened its arms and slapped in the direction of the black gust. The strong black gust began to twist. As the formidable force of the wind collided with the gust, the wind instantly broke down into different flurries of air and swept through the surroundings. A few other spells were fired at the fierce bone undead general, including a blazing red fiery fist, ground break, a purple thunderbolt, a green magic vine, and the leader's ice lock, bone husk. Any other warrior-level creature would be covered in wounds and bruises after receiving so many intermediate spells, even if it were still alive. Yet as the flames, shackles of ice, and broken vines fell to the ground, the team discovered that the fierce bone undead general's bones were sturdy as steel, as if the spells were completely useless against the creature. "What kind of defense is that?" yelled Zhou Ming. Skeletons were usually harder to deal with compared to zombies, as skeletons had gotten rid of the useless flesh after refining a certain amount of energy of the dead, resulting in sturdier bones. In terms of lineage, skeletons usually had a higher lineage than zombies, hence a warrior-level skeleton was more difficult to handle than a warrior-level zombie. Everyone had fought against more warrior-level zombies than warrior-level skeletons. However, the skeleton before them was a lot trickier to deal with. They simply were clueless about how to fight it. "Our spells are not strong enough to inflict damage to it. Let's back off a little and think of some other plan," said the leader decisively. "But what happens if it gets close to the walls?" "It could easily break a hole in the walls with its strength," blurted out Zhou Ming. "Zhou Ming, watch out!" Zhou Ming was still in the middle of speaking when the fierce bone undead general suddenly drew out a sharp spike from its body and hurled it at her. Zhou Ming did not think the fierce bone undead general would still be able to attack her, given the distance between them. She was caught completely off guard. Even if she were able to summon her shield equipment, she could not tell if it was strong enough to defend her from the spike. As Zhou Ming's thoughts were frozen, a lump of black shadow suddenly appeared in front of her. Zhou Ming flinched, discovering that Mo Fan had eerily risen from the shadow and was now standing in front of her. Departing nether shield, Mo Fan pushed one of his arms forward. A blue glow immediately gathered on his hand, taking the shape of a shield and quickly materializing. The departing nether shield with a blue metallic luster appeared in front of Mo Fan. The shield stuck into the ground, just tall enough to shield a human behind it. The sharp spike collided with the shield. Its penetrative force was extremely shocking. Mo Fan's departing nether shield was considered high-quality equipment, yet the spike managed to dig into the shield and almost penetrated it. Mo Fan, who was standing behind the shield, could see the tip of the spike in front of him. His eyes totally widened. "Damn it, you're not the only one with spikes." Any strong impact would trigger the departing nether shield's counterattack. A dark blue spike suddenly flew out from the departing nether shield, which flew right at the fierce bone undead general's face in a cold flicker of light. The departing nether spike coincidentally stabbed into the fierce bone undead general's left eye and was stuck inside it. That eye of the fierce bone undead general, which was previously glowing like an LED, simply turned dim. The creature, which could not feel any pain, was not too bothered when one of its eyes went out. It simply tensed its legs and dashed ahead. Chapter 575. What kind of defense is that? "Fuck me," cursed Mo Fan when he realized that the fierce bone undead general was targeting him. When the others were firing intermediate spells at the creature, it only tried to ram them brainlessly, yet the creature simply charged toward him as if it had found its long-lost father, when he only triggered the defensive counterattack of the departing nether shield. Mo Fan was planning to kite the fierce bone undead general using his fleeing shadow. However, when he remembered that Zhou Ming was still standing behind him, it would be a disaster if the fierce bone undead general attacked Zhou Ming instead when he ran away. Black Snake magic armor. Mo Fan had no choice but to be a hero once again, turning himself into a sturdy shield to protect his high school classmate. After the Black Snake magic armor was summoned, Mo Fan was immediately surrounded by several faint black snakes. As they extended their bodies, his whole body was covered in black scales, from head to toes, a full suit. The Black Snake magic armor was not ordinary, granting Mo Fan an imperious appearance. Zhou Ming, who was standing behind him, was stunned, as if she had just watched Saint Seiya putting on his golden armor in a marvelous way. However, in less than a second, the furious fierce bone undead general had reached Mo Fan. It raised skeletal arms as hard as steel hammers and smashed down fiercely. "Save him, quick!" screamed Mu Bai in a panic. Why wasn't anyone casting spells to interrupt the fierce bone undead general's attack? Even though Mo Fan was wearing armor, the fierce bone undead general's strength was too formidable. The armor would simply be crushed into scraps. The weak body of a magician would not be able to survive the impact. The ground had cratered under the fierce bone undead general's attack. The creature pulled its arms back in satisfaction. It glanced into the hole with its remaining right eye where the human was supposed to be turned into minced meat. A human figure had been knocked deep into the ground. The black armor plate was still emitting a reflective flicker. Not dead yet? The fierce bone undead general was slightly confused, despite being an undead. The swing alone could easily smash a warrior-level demon beast half dead, let alone a human. The fierce bone undead general was agitated. It uttered a roar and dragged Mo Fan out from the hole. The creature's palm was enormous, big enough to grab him by the chest. As if the creature was worried that the ground was not solid enough, it raised its other arm and swung it wildly at the hand holding Mo Fan. As the other hand approached its target, the creature quickly let go of its grip on the first hand, as it was trying to smash Mo Fan between its palms. The bones collided with one another. The tip of the bones began to crack, with bone splinters falling everywhere. Following the self-damaging attack, the fierce bone undead general finally pulled its hands apart. However, the fierce bone undead general's red eye immediately emitted an enraged glow. The human covered in armor was not crushed by its attack, nor was his flesh and blood splattered in its palms. The sturdy armor simply left a huge crack in its palms from the overwhelming impact. As the creature tried to exert more force, its bones began to shatter where the cracks were. A few segments of its bones broke into pieces and fell to the ground. The leader, Mu Bai, Zhou Ming, Zhang Li, the girl wearing a hat, and the handsome man almost felt like their jaws were dropping together with the creature's broken bones. "What? What kind of defense is that?" uttered Zhou Ming again. She had most likely forgotten that she had used the same words to describe the fierce bone undead general's defense. Such incredible armor. It feels like the fierce bone undead general can't do anything about it. The fierce bone undead general failed to smack Mo Fan to death even after it had smashed its own palms into pieces. Mo Fan's armor was simply too unbelievable. Mo Fan remained modal as he escaped from between the creature's palms. He immediately cursed when he realized that everyone was looking at him as if he were a monster. The fierce bone undead general's strength was not enough to break his sturdy armor, yet he had still suffered the impact from the collision. He was feeling extremely dizzy and his bones were on the verge of collapsing. The fierce bone undead general let out a great roar, as if it had gone mad from humiliation. Initially, its goal was to pursue the scent of fresh living humans coming from inside the walls, but now, its only focus was to smash the human before it into pieces. "What are you waiting for? Mu Bai, use your ice spells to freeze its legs. We'll attack its legs so it won't be able to charge at us further," yelled Mo Fan. Mu Bai came to a realization after hearing Mo Fan's suggestion. That's right. He did freeze the bone spike and shatter it into pieces, yet why didn't he try to freeze the lower limbs of the fierce bone undead general? Anything extremely sturdy, like bones, would become extremely fragile after they were frozen. Mo Fan's suggestion immediately woke the team up. The hunter leader, who also had the ice element, immediately cast the spell to freeze the fierce bone undead general's lower limbs while the creature was feeling defeated after failing to crush Mo Fan. The fierce bone undead general's lower limbs were rather thin, even though they had to support such a massive body weight. It was the most vulnerable part of the creature. The effect of an ice spread lasted fairly long. Many people would ignore the spell that did not pose any threat when it was first cast, yet as time passed and combined with Ice Lock, the frost would turn out to be extremely effective. Mu Bai and the leader's ice spells gradually became effective, too. The frost continued to penetrate the fierce bone undead general's bones, joints, and legs. More firepower. Mo Fan had been observing the fierce bone undead general's lower limbs. He discovered that the creature's movement was not as easy as before. Each step it took seemed to require great effort. All right, now, Thunderbolt. Mo Fan quickly completed the lightning star pattern and pointed in the sky above the fierce bone undead general. Stormy clouds appeared immediately, and following the purple-black flicker in Mo Fan's eyes, a shocking purple lightning bolt struck down with great power. The lightning bolt was perfectly straight, yet it somehow swept past the fierce bone undead general without landing on the creature's body. Holy crap! How did you even miss that? The hell, are you stupid? Did you seriously miss that? Scolded Zhang Li instantly. Idiot, shut the fuck up, shouted Mo Fan. The fierce bone undead general's lower limbs suddenly emitted a loud crack. Lots of cracks began to appear around the joints on the fierce bone undead general's legs, and continued to spread along its limbs. Chapter 576 Assembling Signal. With a great crack, the fierce bone undead general's lower limbs broke into pieces as the thunderbolt swept past its legs. Its body simply collapsed under its own weight. The fierce bone undead general fell to the ground as it lost its support, like a building made of stone crumbling down to the ground. So your lightning seed has a space trembling effect, exclaimed the leader joyfully as he alertly noticed something out of the ordinary. Anything fragile was unable to withstand any high-frequency vibration. Mo Fan's thunderbolt was not aiming at the fierce bone undead general, as it was not strong enough to inflict any damage to its sturdy bones. However, if the thunderbolt swept past the fierce bone undead general nearby, it would simply vibrate the space and the ground nearby, resulting in a shockwave that would shatter the fragile frozen lower limbs of the fierce bone undead general. Since the fierce bone undead general's legs were destroyed, its body alone could no longer pose any threat to the team. Meanwhile, the frost had penetrated deeper into the creature's body, freezing the remaining joints of the immobilized creature. As frost completely covered the creature's body, another heavy blow alone would simply shatter the creature into pieces. Mo Fan, you're so damn good. Zhou Ming's eyes flickered, the typical behavior of a young girl adoring someone. Hey kid, are you seriously just a student? It's rare to see a student able to defeat powerful creatures so cleverly, the leader complimented him sincerely. The team returned with glory after defeating the warrior-level undead. There were many magicians on the walls, although most of them were basic magicians. They noticed the battle not far away from the walls while they were defending the walls against the undead. They initially thought the team would be forced to withdraw as the fierce bone undead general was extremely strong, yet to their surprise, the team managed to defeat it so quickly. Impressive, very impressive. The fierce bone undead general is almost as strong as a big skeleton general, yet you still managed to defeat it, complimented the hunters close to the walls. It's all thanks to this new student, the leader humbly patted Mo Fan's shoulder. Zhao Kunsen and Wang Pengze never stopped complimenting Mo Fan, either. Zhao Kunsen was a typical vengeful person, who immediately spoke in a weird tone, unlike someone else, who likes to criticize people when he's totally useless. All he did was cast some ineffective spells. I could probably do the same too. Yeah, that's right. Wang Pengze added, I told you, having a higher level doesn't mean you're good at killing demon beasts. Interesting colors played over Zhang Li's face. He had a strong urge to simply tear the two's mouths apart. However, it was true that he did not contribute much. He could not find any words to rebuke their accusations, and could only glare at Mo Fan. Zhao Kunsen and Wang Pengze were so vengeful that they kept paying the grudge they bore back to Zhang Li 10 times over, and he ended up leaving in anger. Was that a bit too much? Asked Mu Bai. I don't think so. You shouldn't be too merciful against people like him. Mo Fan thought Zhao Kunsen and Wang Pengze did a great job. My score is going to rise a lot after killing the skeleton general, hee hee. Zhou Ming was in a great mood. Not only was she able to receive the same amount of resources for the month, she might be rewarded with more instead. Mo Fan smiled, too. As he was about to speak, his side glance caught a glimpse of the walls being covered in a huge blood-colored glow. The blood-colored glow was followed by a loud bell ringing, which echoed over the outer walls, startling everyone. "What was that?" Mo Fan asked, confused. "Something big has appeared. That was a warning," explained the leader. "Something big?" asked Mo Fan. The ringing of the bell lasted for quite some time. It kept people alert, as if it contained some unique power. "I don't know. That's the signal for us to gather together. It's asking all the magicians that were not on duty to gather on the north wall." The leader raised his eyes and watched a few white lights flickering in the sky. Mo Fan had also seen the white lights, which were shining brightly, like fireworks. He was not from the ancient capital, so he had no idea what the signal meant. "It feels like something is happening. They need support from magicians," added Mu Bai, as he glanced at the long walls. "Let's head over. I haven't done anything today." Zhang Li was eager to show his capabilities. 4 signals in a row, that means it's an emergency. The girl who's injured should stay here. Everyone else will head over at once. They must have trouble getting people over in time, hence they were forced to use the brilliant light to signal the others, hoping the intermediate magicians nearby could lend a hand, deduced the leader sternly. "Mo Fan, should we go and take a look?" asked Zhou Ming. The signal was similar to an SOS signal. Normally, it was up to the magicians to decide if they were willing to help, but when the signal consisted of 4 consecutive flares, the magicians from institutes, magic associations, the Hunter Union, and the renowned families were obliged to lend a hand. Those who purposely decided not to help and left would be expelled from their respective factions. People won't use assembly signals in normal circumstances. "Something big must have happened," said Mu Bai. "Come, let's go. To the tower on the northern walls." The main tower of the walls in the north was located at the entrance of the northern walls. The tower was a lot bigger than the corner towers. It simply felt like a magnificent pagoda standing firmly atop the walls. The assembly signal was fired from here. When Mo Fan and the others arrived, the place was already crowded with magicians. Most of them were basic magicians, based on the badges they were wearing on their chests. There were only a few intermediate magicians available at this time, as most of them were currently on duty. Students like Zhou Ming, Mu Bai, and the others were considered a special kind. All magicians in the intermediate level and above should gather at the top of the walls. "The other will remain here on standby," a loud voice rang out, echoing in the ears of the magicians. The few intermediate magicians immediately made their way up into a hall that was open on both ends, where they could see the darkness looming over the vast land in the distance. "Are these all we have?" asked a deep voice. A man with a beard and an extraordinary temperament walked down from the stairs leading to somewhere higher in the tower, followed by a royal guard and a commander. "Greetings, councilman. Greetings, councilman." A few intermediate magicians who were fairly active around the area immediately greeted him respectfully. Mo Fan glanced ahead. He immediately recognized the person just by the beard on the person's face. His eyes widened. Councilman Zhu Meng was glancing at the group of magicians too, and his eyes also widened as he just happened to exchange glances with Mo Fan. "It's you again, the kid with bad luck." Councilman Zhu Meng was stunned for a second. "I did feel like it's quite bad luck to stumble into you," replied Mo Fan. "How bold." The commander glared at Mo Fan when he saw the young magician being disrespectful. Zhu Meng waved his hand. He had gotten used to being scolded by the daring kid back in Hangzhou. He never assumed the kid would respect him. He did not continue on the topic, as it seemed like he had something urgent to say. However, the leader, Zhou Ming, Mu Bai, and even Zhang Li were looking at Mo Fan in bewilderment. They could not understand why Mo Fan, who was only an intermediate magician, would know someone like Councilman Zhu Meng.